How can I balance altruism and follow my inner needs or longings? Brackets, if they would hurt someone. Can you say something on how it works? Ego versus altruism, following your inner true needs. Altruism meaning selfless action, doing something for others. And then there are inner needs or longings that might hurt someone. If they actively hurt someone, they are not true needs, they would be egoic needs. Egoic needs sometimes actively hurt another, for example, unconscious behavior such as diminishing somebody else verbally in order to feel one's own ego growing. People do it all the time, it's unconscious. So if somebody has a success or has something that you don't have, the ego in its absurd sense of self feels diminished if somebody else has something that you don't have. And then the ego sometimes makes a remark that is designed either to hurt the ego of that person or to diminish the value of what that person has achieved or possesses. So even children sometimes do it. The ego already, of course, develops in the children at school. When you listen to children talking to each other, you can already often detect very clearly the ego there, the sense of identity that is based on identification with things other than yourself that you take on board to enhance your sense of self. And not that you can stop them, it just is part. The natural progression, I would suggest, is for human being to develop an ego as they are adolescents, in childhood and adolescence, then when they reach adulthood, begin to go beyond ego, so that ego becomes a symptom or manifestation of growing up, of immaturity. That would be, we may be going in that direction, but of course the way it is now, it's not the case. The ego continues to grow and seek to grow, sometimes until you reach your deathbed. And then you remember the gravestone where it says, I got here first, so I won. That's the last triumph of the ego. And so listening, overhearing children, you can say, my dad just bought a BMW. What car does your dad have? Oh, he has a VW. But I know someone, he carries on, he says, but I know someone who has a friend whose uncle has a Bentley. It's far superior to a BMW. Got him. The ego says, I got him. But it's owned by VW, isn't it? That's a long story. Altruism, inner needs. So inner needs that hurts. I just gave one small example of hurting others. Other egoic manifestations of hurting others would be to sabotage somebody else's success or what they want to achieve, to take something away from somebody, to spread rumors about some bad things about another human being in order to create suffering or stop them from doing or achieving what they want to achieve. So many ways in which the ego would hurt someone for its own, in order to strengthen itself, the illusion of itself. So those are not your true inner needs, they are egoic needs. You need to recognize those things in yourself. Then there is an indirect way of hurting someone that may not be egoic. For example, let's say you are a young man or woman, 20 years old, 19 years old, and your parents or your mother or your father want what's best for you. They clearly have designs on your future, and your dad was a lawyer and he has a flourishing law practice, and obviously you are supposed to follow in his footsteps, there's no question about it. And if you didn't, you would make your parents really suffer. Of course, that is indirectly inflicting suffering. If you are true to yourself and your longings, which are not egoic, you may feel inclined towards something else. There's nothing wrong with law, but it's not for everybody. You may feel inclined to follow a totally different path. And would you, and some people do that, in order to spare their parents from suffering, they do what makes them happy. It might not be your parents. Do what makes somebody else happy. And so you are doing something that does not correspond to your true inclinations, desires, where you want to go, but you want to spare someone else from suffering. Now that is not the most conscious course of action, because you're condemning yourself to unhappiness and frustration. You're denying those deeper things. They are not egoic. They arise from a deeper level of your being. And you are not making these people suffer. They make themselves suffer. So they have to learn their lesson of letting go of expectations. And if their lesson involves suffering, that's just how it is. Another matter would be if your parents are old or there's only one parent left, your inclination may be to move somewhere and do something, but then there's nobody else to look after your father or mother who needs somebody. That is a moral thing that you need to become very present with, to see whether there's an alternative solution or whether you will give up one thing in order for the love of another human being. And if you do so, you would have to be total in your doing, so that you are not unhappy looking after your aging parent, continuously regretting that you were not able to do what you really wanted to do. Whatever course of action you choose, you need to surrender to and do it totally. These are all, a lot of presence is required. Altruism, helping others, is wonderful, but it needs to come from a deep, not from some mental, to help somebody because in order to improve the mental image you have of yourself, but to help somebody because it feels right and it feels good, and you've seen the other as yourself, and to give something to another feels better more often than to give something to yourself. This mind-made sense of self is also much more focused on the negative than the positive. To be free, you awaken to who you are beyond your history and your life situation.
When I took the time to kind of go into me and to become silent, when I started talking, I first realized I'm talking slower, exactly as you said. But also what I realized that my face, so basically my face had been really, before that, it has been blocked in a sense, the face muscles. Mm-hmm. So when I first talked, I must have done this under some kind of pressure, or it was not natural. Mm-hmm. It was me talking to someone, but I realized the second time I said the same words basically, that I could feel that my facial muscles were
Relaxed.
relaxed. And no, I realized that had been before so much tense, and they started relaxing when I became aware of the fact that my facial muscles were tense before.
Yes.
So kind of, it made me really realize that if one is not conscious, we just run this mental thing, the way we talk to people, just without thinking about it, and how artificial that is in a way. So it's just like a machine talking,
Yeah.
but not really.
Conditioned self.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, very good. Very good. And that's a really good observation that you notice that your facial muscles were tense before compared to the second time. And when we act from the conditioned mind, so when we speak from the conditioned sense of self, from the mind, we do contract. Our whole body actually contracts. And it's this almost like this squeezing and this anxiousness instead of just being you, just being yourself into that relaxed awareness. So Eckhart used the words intensity, intensify your awareness. Another way to also look at it, in which I teach in the Presence Through Movement, is, and his is not wrong, it's just a different pointer, okay, and mine is just a different pointer. I use the words relaxed awareness. Because when we come from that still place, there's something in us that just relaxes, unwinds, and we then communicate, we be with people, we be with ourselves in this kind of relaxed awareness. Something happens, something arises, the practice is just to relax that body and just become that relaxed awareness, so then we can make the right action from there. And that right action may be no action. Just as when somebody was doing this, when I did this exercise with another group, and they said, we never even talked. There was no desire to talk. There was nothing drawing us out. We just wanted to sit silently together. So when we live from the conceptual mind habitually, and it's a habit to do this, just like it's a habit, it's almost like a habit to keep thinking and thinking and thinking. Our bodies will just go. But in the moment of realizing yourself, there's this, Krishnamurti called it ease of being. It's this ease, I call it this relaxed awareness. Just to observe the world, observe your mind, observe everything that arises in this relaxed awareness. It's acceptance. When we accept, there's no tension. When we're grasping, there's tension. When we're wanting something, when we are looking only for solutions through thought, instead of going into stillness and allowing the solution to arise, there's tension. So, really good observation. Thank you for sharing that.
You can speak out, maybe you can post something on one of the many platforms that are available, something that is sane rather than insane. But it may, perhaps you can post something that points out the insanity of it all. So how you respond, and that, if you are, we can use the two words, react respond. The way I use them is, react means it's a karmically determined reaction. You react out of the conditioning of your mental emotional field. Response implies that you are present and your action is no longer determined by the mental emotional conditioning of the person. There is a higher intelligence, one could say, or I call it wisdom, but in other words, there's a higher intelligence that can then operate in your daily life. A higher intelligence, which we could call wisdom. So it's not the conventional intelligence that you can measure in IQ tests. That's a very limited version of intelligence. There's a higher intelligence that comes in through presence, that deals more intelligently with any situation that arises in your life. That's the only possible way of dealing intelligently, is by dealing with the situation through presence. Especially important, of course, in human relationships, because there's so much unconsciousness that happens in the interaction between human beings, between two human beings and larger numbers of human beings, and then groups of collectives of millions of human beings here and another million there and there. Or this, you can see when you look at politics and affairs and so what's happening in the world, there's very little intelligence, the way they deal with things. And you are amazed. How can they be so short-sighted and ultimately have to use a simple word, stupid? But these people have degrees, they have university degrees. How can they be so stupid? Well, they only activated a very limited version of intelligence that you can measure in IQ tests. That's not enough. I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anybody who has a very high IQ or is a member of this. There's an organization called Mensa, I believe. So if you have a very IQ, you can be a member of that, and that's good for your identity, of course. So I don't want to take anything away from you, but that is not real intelligence. It's a form of intelligence, but it's a relatively low form of intelligence. A much higher intelligence comes in through presence, and that is lacking in the world. There are occasionally you see, very rarely you see a politician, actually you can see, oh, this person has some real intelligence and insights, and it's usually not the people who are running things. If it's a politician, it's usually somebody who's been pushed to the periphery of politics, and from there he used to see comments on the stupidity of what's happening in the world. I've observed it's in different countries, a similar phenomenon. There are a few people here and there who can see clearly where we are going and what we're doing. It's crazy. Because there is a lack of this higher intelligence that is beyond the egoic mind. And, well, at the moment it doesn't look good because we're going on. I was going to use that weird expression about the hand basket again. So you can see it. Now it's important when you look at the state of the world, it's important that you do not enter a reactive mode, because that will draw you into unconsciousness. If you watch too much television or current affairs, you will be drawn into most likely unconsciousness, unless you watch it as an anthropological study of how misguided humanity can be. So you need to stay present while you look at all this and see what's happening. Question may arise, shouldn't I be doing something to, well, there may be something you can do, bring some sanity into this world, perhaps through saying something, speaking out, pointing out something, not creating enemies. If you see people are deluded in what they say or do, don't make them into enemies and attack them and say, you are totally crazy. No, it may be that what they do maybe and probably is dysfunctional and stupid, or the opinions they hold may be extremely misguided and irrational. So you can address the opinions that they hold, their mental positions, and point out the irrationality and so on, without making the people who hold their opinion into enemies. So don't equate the mental positions that people hold with who they essentially are. You can speak out, maybe you can post something on one of the many platforms that are available, something that is sane rather than insane. But perhaps you can post something that points out the insanity of it all. Some people do that, so that's a good thing. Now, because some people may suddenly see, oh yes, that's true. So higher intelligence comes in, and that can then deal with situations, and that's the end of karma. What humanity is doing now collectively is karma playing itself out, the movement of unconsciousness. And so, as we mentioned yesterday with reference to individuals, you remember we talked about responsibility. Can you hold a person responsible for what they do if they are unconscious? We talked about that yesterday. If they are in the grip of their mental emotional conditioning, that's their karma. Can you hold a karmic formation person? Can you hold a karmic formation responsible for what they do? Not really. So there's a deep wisdom in what Jesus said, forgive them for they know not what they do. Forgiveness means the realization that they are not responsible, they cannot do otherwise. But we also, and this also applies to the collective, what all the politicians are doing and so on. They don't know any better. They are in the grip of egoic reactivity and short-sightedness that comes with it, and so on. But as is the case with individuals, although they may not be and cannot be held responsible, and yet they have to suffer the consequences of their unconsciousness. This is how humans ultimately awaken. They're not responsible, but they still have to, they create suffering for themselves and others, and through the suffering that's created by the unconsciousness, an awakening happens. So, in other words, the ego is necessary for the awakening to happen. The ego ultimately self-destructs. It has built into it a self-destruct function. That is ultimate wisdom. So that's also applies to the collective. Already, if you look at the 20th century, the wars that happened and the internal conflicts in countries that happened, the countless millions upon millions killed by other humans, what they did, the terrible suffering. This is all the movement of unconsciousness. They don't know what they do, and then humanity suffers and suffers and suffers. Through the suffering, gradually, an awakening happens. So the ego's dysfunction creates suffering, and ultimately the suffering acts as an awakener. It's just a question of how much longer is the suffering going to go, and what's the next stage, you may ask, on the scale of collective suffering. I don't know, but it doesn't look good at the moment. But you are here to represent, to embody the higher intelligence. I mean, hopefully you don't make that into a mental concept. I embody the higher intelligence. It is true, but it should not become a mental concept that you identify with. And so the sanity, you embody the sanity in a world that is still predominantly, one has to say, insane in many ways. Not all of it is insane, but a lot of it, some important parts are insane. So let's then see whatever comes is may be bad from a lower perspective, doesn't look good, but ultimately everything that happens is in the service of the evolution of consciousness, even in your own life. And if it applies in your own life, it also applies to the collective of humanity.
My question is, how does one remain centered in stillness when we might be surrounded by and asked to engage mentally and emotionally with others who are not?
I assume that this situation happens to you quite often because you're asking the question. And of course, it's a very common thing for people to find themselves in such situations. Let's assume then these are human beings that you cannot easily, or you don't want to separate yourself from, like could be family members or it could be people you work with. Those two situations are often situations where you feel you want to continue to interact with these people, or you have to interact with these people, but it's getting difficult because there is toxicity, or there's a lot of unconsciousness, egos fight against other egos, and so on. Let's just for a moment put aside the more extreme manifestations of such situations. There are situations where, whether it's family members or at work, there are some extreme situations that are so destructive and toxic that the only healthy and sane course of action would be to remove yourself. So if it's an extreme situation, let's say you're in a relationship, the relationship is sometimes violent, there's physical violence, or there's repeated emotional violence, such an extreme situation. Or you are at work and the company that you work for is the environment, the energy is so toxic and negative that just going into that office, you feel the weight of it and the pull of that negativity, and it's full of ego battling each other. So in certain extreme situations, I would recommend that you remove yourself from this. Because I mentioned that at first, because I want to put that aside. We need to know extreme situations involving emotional violence, physical violence, whatever it may be. You have to take responsibility and remove yourself from that situation. But many situations, and I assume in your case, perhaps it's not that extreme. So what remains is normal human unconsciousness, not the extreme forms of unconsciousness. So to deal with normal human unconsciousness, again, be aware when you are interacting with people. Realize that you may not always succeed in doing this, but the most important thing, see if you can bring about a shift in the way in which you approach the situation and these people. The most important thing in such situations is your state of consciousness rather than whatever it is that they are talking about. They may be talking about this or that, whether it's at work, or they may be gossiping, or they may be whatever they're engaged in, emotional, ego stuff. Use it as an opportunity to stay present. And it's not easy. And you can only, you need to intensify your presence when you are with unconscious people. By that I mean, when you are sitting alone in a room, or you're walking out in nature, being present is not that difficult. Especially nature is conducive to presence. Or being alone in a room, if you discover that you actually like sitting alone in a room, that's a great thing, because that means you become comfortable with yourself. There are still, the majority of humans still become very uncomfortable with sitting alone in a room. And you may discover that you actually like being alone, not continuously, you still love people, but you also love being alone, because when you're alone, you can sense the presence that you are, the very simple but powerful presence. And you sense there's a stillness there. It's lovely. And then, of course, then you leave your room and then you meet other people. You lose yourself. Because there's a gravitational pull that the mind has. And people know that. So other people's minds will try to draw you in. May I ask you before I carry on, is it more a family situation in your case, or is it a work situation, or which one is it predominantly?
I would say, thank you for asking. It is both, and both family and work occasionally are issues, or not issues, but present themselves as a challenge. What is an ongoing daily challenge is the unconsciousness of the city I'm surrounded in. So, by Wednesday, that starts to peak and becomes much more difficult for me to stay out of my head. It becomes very noisy.
Or you
The
can
busyness.
sense the energy field of the city.
Yes.
Ah,
Yes.
right. Yes, yes.
Sunday is very pleasant. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are not.
Right, right.
So, but it's really, that plus the more intense situations of work and family, which occasionally come in.
Yes, yes. I need to ask one more question. Do you find yourself drawn into when other people are ego controlled? Do you find yourself that emotionally, mentally, you become just like them, or do you feel you're a little bit of an outsider now that's observing what's going on? Or are you a full participant temporarily in the unconscious interactions that are taking place, the drama, whatever it may be? Are you a full participant, or are you sometimes a reluctant participant, or you remain there as almost an outsider, observing what's going on? How is it for you?
It oscillates. Most of the time, I am an outsider who enjoys engaging. I suspect that my sensitivity to presence and stillness is increasing, or the sensitivity to that lack of in myself is increasing. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. Thank you. That's good. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Let's talk for a moment about the energy field of the city before we go on to your personal thing. I don't know whether you meditate or not, whether you do some formal meditation, and often you say yes. Often people meditate, and then something disturbing things happen while they meditate. Suddenly there's disturbing noise. This morning I was sitting in my living room, and it's Wednesday, so they do the gardening on Wednesday with extremely noisy leaf blowers. This is the time of year of leaf blowers. And so the noise came up, and I was it was so peaceful as I was sitting there, and suddenly there was this, and often I immediately knew how to completely transcend it, because it's second nature to me now. But often I have to tell people how to deal with disturbing things like that, especially when they're trying to meditate and then that happens. I always say, incorporate whatever arises during this time when you're trying to meditate. Everything that arises, make it part of your meditation. In other words, resist nothing that arises. Don't demand that anything that arises should not arise. In that case, even a disturbing noise, such as a leaf blower, is incorporated into your meditation by deep acceptance of what is. You don't resist. You may be able to practice the same in the city when you feel the energy field. You may be walking there or driving or just being in an apartment or office. Practice surrender to this energy that you feel. Then you may be able to transcend that particular energy. If you react to it, it has you in its grip. In a way, one could say, when you react to toxic energy, you become part of the toxic energy without knowing it. So the only way you can become free, other than removing yourself and live in the countryside, the only way you can get beyond it is through the deep surrender. So completely, and that can be a spiritual practice. As I said, except in the most extreme cases when there's violence of some kind or extraordinary toxicity, then obviously you remove yourself. Otherwise, surrender to something that seems unacceptable, and yet you surrender, you're totally okay with it suddenly, the toxic energy of the city, but you no longer even call it toxic. You can sense it and allow yourself to sense that and say, oh, that's what it is. And you might also then recognize it as an expression of human unconsciousness to some extent, but also, yes, it's still a manifestation of life at a particular stage, evolutionary stage, and that's what it is. You can then, I had that realization many years ago when I went through a shift in consciousness. At the time I lived in London, and I had to travel every morning to work on the subway, which is called Tube or Underground, they call it. It has different lines, and one is called, at that time, it was decades ago, I don't know how it is now, the line that I had to catch is called the Northern Line. The Northern Line was always considered the worst of all tube lines because it had the longest delays and the most totally crammed carriages that always, you can never find a seat. You had to push yourself in, and then there were long gaps, no trains. People called it the misery line. And I had to catch that line every morning. After my shift in consciousness, I still was the same. I went in there and I felt completely at peace. On the Northern Line, which before was a source of great unhappiness, felt completely at peace. I couldn't quite understand why for a long time. And later I realized I'm actually not complaining about anything anymore. I'm not complaining about it. It's just it is. My mind wasn't saying anything about it anymore. I could still feel that energy, but it was, I allowed myself to feel that. And by allowing myself to feel it, there was transcendence. So you are then be vigilant about self-image arising, self-esteem, self-worth. Now, on the conventional level, self-esteem or self-worth are derived from the way in which you relate to society that you live in. To a large extent, certain things that you may have achieved or that you may possess, or in some traditional cultures, your sense of self-worth is to do with your ancestors. Not so much in the Western world, and certainly much less in so-called new countries like United States or Australia or Canada. In the new countries, your ancestors are not that important as far as your sense of identity is concerned. But in older cultures, your sense of identity and sense of self-worth is sometimes to a large extent derived from your ancestors. And even if you have achieved nothing, and you can have a high sense of self-worth because your great-grandfather and the ones before and before and before and before, they have achieved great things in the eyes of the world. Perhaps it means they just killed more people than anybody else. And finally, they became, the king gave them a title of nobility, and suddenly they became a duke. And you have pictures of your ancestors on the walls. True self-worth comes from a deeper place that is actually not related to achievement in this world, or whatever this world calls achievement, because that is delusion also. What is it that makes a successful life? Now, the world has a certain opinion about that. The mainstream culture. But that is a delusion too, because most humans who are considered highly successful are also unhappy. Burdened with a huge ego in many cases, making themselves and others unhappy in the process. True self-worth comes from that place of beingness. It comes from the I am. And it is not comparative. On the horizontal dimension in this world, your self-worth is always there. You need comparison. And to have a heightened sense of self-worth, you need to be better in some ways than others. You compare yourself to others, and that determines your sense of self-worth. Possessions, looks, knowledge, skills, all these things that you have, things that you can do, things that you know. Self-worth could be about all your knowledge in your mind that you have accumulated. So do you derive your self-worth from those things? And but it relies on comparison. Compared to others, one person says, I look much better. I look better. Not me, obviously, I'm just talking about. My body is better than other bodies, my appearance. And you derive your self-worth from external appearance for a while, until time does something to it, as it will, unless you die first. But eventually time will erode the things that you identify with when your self-worth is derived from physical strength or physical appearance. And then eventually you shrink like an apple that you leave for too long on the kitchen counter. At first the apple looks and then you forget it in a corner of your kitchen counter, and then a few weeks later it has shrunk. It's soft, it's what happened to it? Time did something to it. And it does that to your body too. So that's not a good thing to real sense of self-worth from, but it's very seductive, especially if you are blessed with a great body or great appearance. You have to be very careful, because it's not going to last, and then you'll be very unhappy. Possessions. I have more than skills. I can do better than other people. I have more knowledge. Compare, and then you get a heightened sense of self-worth through comparison. So you need to have a sense of self-worth. You need superiority in some area of your life to get that sense. So you have to rely on others being considered less worthy than you for your sense of self-worth. That's all to do. If you live exclusively on the horizontal dimension, that's how it works. And your sense of self-worth is very fragile, because there could always be others that, even in the area that you most identify with, there could always be others who are even better than you there, and they usually are. And the true self-worth is not comparative at all. It comes directly from the realization of the being that you are, which is precious. There's a sense of infinite worth or worthiness in there that does not depend on any comparison. It's life itself, the sacredness of life itself that you are. And success, ultimately, what is the only real success in life? It is how conscious you are, how much consciousness is manifesting, emerging, shining through you here and now. Not your historical past. Let's say that one or two of you have had a very bad life up to this point. Maybe every decision you've made has been wrong and it has led to disastrous consequences. Maybe you spent years in prison and then you're out and then you didn't succeed in that and then you suffered and so on. But now you're here. For some reason, you're here. This is an extreme case. It probably doesn't apply to any of you, but I'm just giving an example of, let's say your total life up to this point has been a disaster in the eyes of the world, or maybe even in your own eyes. But now somehow you go, and here you begin to awaken, wow, to your essence identity. That is the only true success, your consciousness, your state of consciousness. And suddenly, the whole history of you was a preparation, although it looked like a total failure, it was a preparation for this awakening. And so retrospectively, this total failure of your personal history, it all made sense. You needed it to awaken. All the suffering that were perhaps inflicted on you by others and then self-created suffering, all the suffering has brought you to the point of awakening. So retrospectively, suddenly, it was all good. It all made sense because it was obviously you needed it to awaken. That's success, not what the world tells you.
You may go to a workshop, a New Age workshop, and say, where they teach you, I'm happy, and then you can kind of, you go, I'm really enjoying this, but you're not. So can you at least accept? I've been a model for 10 years. Somewhere deep inside, I kept hoping for a big break. It never came or has yet to come. Is it time to move on to another job if this job is not making me money? It's time to move to another job if this job is not enjoyable anymore. If you're unable to enjoy what you're doing, then it's time to move to another job. But you have to look to see whether your inability to enjoy the job you're doing now has something to do with the particular job you're doing, or has more to do with your inability to enjoy the present moment. In which case, the next job that you find, you will also not enjoy. So if you can't enjoy your job, either one of these is true. Either there is something for you to change, there's something inherently not right anymore with this particular job, it no longer corresponds to who you are or your state of consciousness, or you cannot enjoy your job because you haven't learned yet to be present enough to enjoy what you are doing now. And you always think, oh, the next one is going to be much better. And if you don't know which one it is of those two, you may have to get another job and then see if you can enjoy that one. Many jobs that the mind tells you cannot be enjoyed actually can be enjoyed. Also, the mind telling you if you enjoy this job that you really don't want this job to be permanent, and if the mind tells you, no, if I enjoy this job, I'll be stuck with it for the rest of my life, and I don't want to be stuck with it. Let's say you got a job working working in a diner as a waiter or waitress, but you really want to get your job as an actress, or you really want to be a writer, you really want to be whatever you want to be, a senator, successor of Donald Trump, whatever your mind says. And so the mind says, I'm not going to enjoy this job because I really want to be somewhere else, and if I enjoy it, then I'll really be stuck. But you may find that the opposite is the case. It is freeing to enjoy what you are doing, even if it's not something that you would want to do for the rest of your life. All you have to do is enjoy the present moment. Your energy field then shifts. And when this energy field shifts, you become open to life only if you no longer resist life. You cannot be open to life, the greater consciousness coming through you, if you resist life. And you resist life if you resist or resent the present moment. That's where life is. So the shift happens. You need to be in the state of alignment with the present moment, no matter what activity you are doing in the present moment. And if you absolutely cannot be in alignment with the present moment, you need to walk out. So if I got a job as a bartender in a disco, I would walk out. I could surrender if they shut me in there and it's impossible for me to leave the building. I would still surrender. But since there is still a door that I can open, I would walk out, because although I know how to surrender, I wouldn't want to surrender there if I can help it. So when we use the expression to enjoy what you do, we get this little word joy here again, enjoy, to enjoy what is the English language, to enjoy what you do. So when you enjoy what you do, joy arises from within. And I would say it's not the doing. It looks as if what you do perhaps gave you joy, but it's really your presence in the doing that allows the joy to come from within you. And then it flows into what you do. So rather than the doing giving you joy, because you are present in the doing, the joy arises from within and it flows into what you do. And so you can say, I enjoy this work. I enjoy doing this. Now, if you cannot enjoy it, try first just to accept it, that this is what you're doing at this moment. Let's say you start off with, you're working at Denny's, or you're not from the United States. Denny's is a chain of diners throughout the States. Not bad. Okay, often there's nothing else if you're driving along. You work at, let's say you work at, and you absolutely are resistant, you don't really want to be there, but you have to earn money. You're a graduate, let's imagine you're a graduate, you've applied for jobs, but because of the recession, you can't get any jobs, and you've had 50 rejections, and you're getting frustrated, and here you are stuck in this menial job. What did I study for all those years? All for nothing. All these thoughts go through your head while you're serving people. Okay, and then you come into contact with a spiritual teaching or this teaching that points to the possibility of enjoying what you do, and you say, I can't enjoy that. Okay, then try something else. Can you at least accept that right now, this is what you do? Don't try to get yourself to enjoy it. It might become unnatural. You might play a role to yourself. You may go to a workshop, a New Age workshop, and say, where they teach you, I'm happy, and then you can kind of, you go, I'm really enjoying this, but you're not. So can you at least accept that this is what you're doing right now, not for the rest of your life, not even perhaps for the whole year, who knows, but just right now, this is all there is right now, so I might as well accept that this is what I'm doing right now. Can you accept it if you can't enjoy it? Okay, I can try that. Feels already better. Feels much better. And sometimes from there, before you know it, there is no clear dividing line between acceptance and enjoyment. Somewhere they merge. So if you begin with acceptance, you may find suddenly there's even some enjoyment there. Acceptance just means there is an absence of resistance. You're just, well, that's what is. And that can sometimes take you suddenly, before you know it, there's an enjoyment that arises. Oh. So, if you think you can't enjoy, don't force yourself to enjoy, that doesn't work. Accept, that's all first. This is what is right now. I talked about that in the New Earth, where I had 3 modalities. It's just come back to you, I haven't read the book in a long time. 3 modalities of doing. You can have acceptance, you can have enjoyment, or the most intense is, then this is usually when there's a creative process happening through you. I call it enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is an intense energy stream that flows, is part of creativity. And so if you are, in order to live consciously and sanely, you have to be in either one of these 3 modalities. If you're neither in acceptance, nor enjoyment, nor enthusiasm, you are somewhere in dysfunction, and you're creating unhappiness and suffering for yourself And that usually implies you're also creating suffering for others, because unhappy humans make others unhappy too. So, if you cannot accept, enjoy, or be in enthusiasm, remove yourself. Remove yourself. And then try again somewhere else. But acceptance, in a way, is the most accessible, of course, to just try that. If you surrender to it, come to a different relationship with it, that can be the agent that awakens you into consciousness.
So my question has to do with what you're just talking about how ego death can be painful. So I'll give a little background, just to give context for my question. So since I was little, I had spontaneous satoris that I didn't understand. And ultimately it led to shame, because it wasn't normal. And it led to confusion about what seemed important. And I have my understandings about where it came from, but at any rate, so having experiences of formlessness and all of that is very familiar. And understanding, a certain understanding of identification and non-identification. And I don't have fear of dying physically that I'm aware of. However, I have a spontaneous, like how the satoris came on. I suppose people would say it could be kundalini energy. Spontaneously, usually when I'm fully asleep, I will wake up and can have this absolute unstoppable realization that I am not going to exist. I'm not afraid of dying in that moment. It's that existential awareness of I'm not going to be here anymore. Yeah. So it's not about fear of death, but it is about ego death, I imagine. And I've tried to work with it in many different ways. I don't know if it's just simply being, maybe more than average narcissist and don't want to die. I don't know if it's that, or if it's just, at any rate, have talked with many spiritual teachers and gotten very different kinds of responses, but mostly want to understand how to be able to face it, because it feels intolerable, and it comes on unbidden, unwittingly, will come up. And my body starts to run. Literally, I'll wake up out of sleep and I'll run. And sometimes I'll scream. The scream is the only thing that gets me out of that realization. I don't want that realization. And so growing up with both of these, I would call it my agony and my ecstasy. I would have both. So anything you can offer, I'd appreciate.
And as a child, you had similar experiences? So wanting to run, is just an impulse that you want to run when this comes on? You don't actually, you stay in bed or you get up and run?
I wake up and I'm already running and screaming. Is the most effective way to try to get it out of my consciousness.
And so the experience itself that makes you run, it exists as an emotion and a thought, or mostly a thought that suddenly triggers that, or what is the thought? What's the element of thinking? You just mentioned a thought, I'm not going to be here. That's a thought. And that is always there when this happens.
Yeah, it's like a realization. Sometimes when I'm almost falling asleep and I see it's coming, I can direct my attention elsewhere But usually when I'm pretty sleepy, it takes over and I can't stop it. Yeah. And then it's just like an epiphany. It's not, so it's a thought, yeah.
So it's almost as if you were experiencing little mini deaths frequently.
Yeah. And I'm not afraid, and it's not like I'm afraid of dying right then. It's nothing to do with that.
But what about the panic that you feel? Isn't that fear?
Yeah, it feels like terror.
Well, that's extreme fear.
Yeah, extreme fear.
So there is fear. So maybe at other times you don't feel the fear, but in those moments you feel it very strongly.
Right. Yeah.
So it's particularly in the morning or at night time it happens when you wake up?
It's night.
Night?
Yeah, I mean, if I wanted to, I could consciously, and I have done this, will it on. Like I can remember it, I can get myself into that space just like I can get myself into Satori. Right. It's the same.
Well, I was actually going to suggest that as a practice, if you can consciously bring it about, because then you have a bit more power, because you're not, if you can, but before you do that, there has to be a lot of conscious awareness, for example, generating a lot of conscious presence through inner body awareness, for example. Do that for 15 minutes or so, and then attempt to consciously bring it on so that you can surrender to what it is that you feel. And then once you surrender to the feeling, then it's no longer fearful. And then it could bring about, it's a relatively, I don't have not many people who have this particular experience in the way you describe it, but it's very interesting. So it's if you can bring it as a practice, do consciousness practice and then just experiment with it and to see if you can bring it about consciously. And because then there's more awareness in you, so that you may not need to run away from it anymore. And if you go into it, suddenly it will lose its frightful nature. And then that is a kind of death. It's like facing a monster. Some people have terrible nightmares where they face monsters and they cannot quite, the monsters are always coming from behind and you have to run away, but you can't run anymore because you can only move very slowly. You're trying to run, but you can't. And it's always when you face the monster, it becomes transformed. It's no longer a monstrous presence, because facing it means consciousness is there. It's only when you run away from it, it remains a monster and can even get bigger. So you have to consciously face it. That is your monster, but that monster will become transformed into something completely different when you face it consciously. But in order to face it consciously, you need the power of consciousness. There needs to be preparation for that, so that there's enough consciousness in you to face it. And then you may find that it's actually a powerful spiritual experience. What before, and it's that's what is preventing you was the fear. So the fear of death comes up very strongly. Perhaps you don't notice it the rest of your life. As you said, in the rest of your life you don't have a fear of death. But in those moments you have an intense fear of death, because death is very close. It's right there. And of course it's easy to say for anybody, I have no fear of death. They're not facing death in that moment. So it's very easy to make a statement, but you face it regularly, it's there. Anybody else who says, I don't fear death, well, maybe you're right, but you won't know it until you're actually looking. Death is right there, and then you'll know. And another thing is, when you experience a great loss of whatever kind, that's a kind of death too. So what happens when so then you'll know whether that perception is correct or not, whether you fear death. This is potentially a powerful spiritual experience, but I would suggest that you, through the fear, the panic that arises, which is the personal self fearing its demise, through that you kind of stop it every time, because you have to run away from it. You cannot fully go into it. But the possibility is there. If there's enough presence in you, enough consciousness, you can allow yourself to experience that fully without the need anymore to run away from it. And then the monster becomes transformed into an enormously helpful figure, so to speak. It becomes an opening. It is often the case, there's a general, as a general rule, some people have one major, huge obstacle in their lives, which can be many different things. It could be a very serious physical thing, that disability. It could be a very serious something in their emotional field. It could be a very serious external thing, the dreadful family karma that they are born into, some crime that happens in their childhood around them. Some people have they have one huge dreadful thing in their lives, and it is often the case that the worst thing in your life, that thing that would normally be regarded as unacceptable, that no human could accept, if you surrender to it, come to a different relationship with it, that can be the agent that awakens you into consciousness, that transforms you, that becomes the opening. Your cross becomes the opening, so to use a Christian, almost medieval Christian term, the cross. So I've seen people who've had one major thing that was the most dreadful burden in their lives, and that eventually became the opening, and they walk up through that. And so this can be the case with you. I believe it can, and I trust that next time we meet, you will stand there and tell us about it, and you will be perhaps awakened through it, have been awakened, if not what is total awakening anyway, but awakened. So that is my advice to you, and that's all I can say.
Thank you.
I am a therapist, and I now feel that I don't take people's problems seriously. I don't know if I can continue to be a psychotherapist. Okay. I also find myself, when I listen to people's problems, a smile arises sometimes, not because of their problems, but because I'm in touch with a deeper reality where their problems are relatively unimportant. And to be in touch with that deeper reality is liberating, and there is a joy in there, in knowing who you are beyond your problems. There is that joy that's there, and I can feel the reality for that person beyond their problems. And that is, I'm not laughing or smiling at them, but at the relative unreality of their problems. So, and that is actually a form of healing. So if that is the case with you, then you can continue to be a psychotherapist. You're not just, you can continue to listen to their problems without giving their problems this absolute reality. A relative reality, yes, but be in touch with that level deep within, where there is no problem, where that person is already complete and whole, and that is the formless consciousness. Every form identity is not complete. It never has the feeling of being complete and whole. There's always stuff missing in your form identity, and there are things that didn't go according to what you imagined when you were young. How did you imagine your life to unfold? Well, you had all kinds of ideas. In many cases, that didn't quite happen. And then people
come and say things like, oh, I would have imagined, I imagined my life to unfold very differently from the way it did unfold. It's really a sad story. And I feel I haven't, my form identity is really, there's so much still missing in who I am. There's so much that I could have achieved, but things happen to stop me from achieving it. And then there's that stuff that I did achieve, then it all came to nothing, it dissolved. I tried so many things, but why didn't I succeed in this or that? Or if you did succeed greatly in this or that area, you go, why am I still so restless and unhappy? Everybody thinks I'm so great, and I've got all these fans on Twitter and Facebook. Why am I still unhappy? And why do I need more of this or that? Even though my picture is in People magazine and other magazines that are not that great. So whatever it is, there's always something wrong with their form identity, and if you think everything is right about your form identity, it won't last for very long. Then you happen to just have hit a brief period, when you feel everything is going great in my life. I've got a great place to live, I've got a great relationship, I've got a great job, I've got a great income, I have a great car, and people recognize my importance. They tell me I'm a VIP. Everything is great. That's how life should be. Now, it is possible for human for brief periods to be in that place, but they would be quite brief, because life just isn't like that. It is designed for things to go wrong. No matter how much positive thinking you do, which is all good, but no matter how much positive thinking you do, there is this thing designed into life. We could call it a sabotage element of sabotage or disruption, which universal intelligence has built into everybody's life. You might have noticed it, but what you might not have noticed is that it is built into everybody's life, and you might have thought that life singled you out to sabotage your life. Because some people are very good at hiding that element in their lives from others, and they wouldn't even admit it, that at night they lie in agony or whatever it is. So that's an interesting fact. Once you know that this disruptive thing is built into your life, then you may come to actually accept that fact, that is a universal thing that every human is meant to face. So there's always, in some area of your life, there's always some disruption happening, or just happened, or happened a few years ago, but still leaving a lot of traces around in you, still influencing the way in which you experience life. And then the next thing comes in, and the next. And once you've resolved your financial problems and you're okay there, finally I've got financial security, and suddenly a health problem comes up. Or the other way around. Or the great job, you suddenly have this wonderful, fulfilling job, and suddenly your company gets taken over by another company, and suddenly you're told, we don't need you anymore. Who am I now without that? No matter, you all know examples from your own life. So, and with some of you, it seems to be just a succession of things going wrong. But they can't have gone that wrong if you are sitting here now. because it's taken you to a spiritual awakening. Nobody would go to a spiritual awakening, well, nobody I know, without experiencing the unsatisfactory nature of one's life situation. So I am grateful to that in my life, and you can be grateful to that in your life, because otherwise the evolution of consciousness would not have happened. If you had been totally happy all your life, no evolution is possible, no development is possible, no deepening is possible. You would be dancing on the surface of things. Let's have another drink and good food and lots another good movie and sensory pleasures and sex, and let's travel and go to another place and explore that, and isn't that nice? And just no depths whatsoever. Of course, you would be incapable of compassion or empathy with other human beings. You would have no deep insights, which all come out of suffering. Just surface existence. But fortunately, very few humans or no humans have that, and if they had it, that would become the disruptive element. The fact that there is nothing disruptive would become the disruptive element in your life. So, on the level of form identity, you never arrive at complete satisfaction. You can't. I can't get no satisfaction. And once you realize that, it's liberating to know, okay, you can still try to improve your life. It's a wonderful thing. Of course, you try to make your life better. If you're not happy where you live, see if you can find a better place to live. Or if your health is not well, maybe you can do something about it. Maybe you can't. If you can't do something about it, take action. But the foundation for action needs to be present moment acceptance of the isness of now, and then you take action. But it'll never be totally satisfying. Therefore, the only satisfying thing is to realize that there is another dimension to who you are. And that's where all satisfaction comes from. The realization that there's more to you than the person, the personality, and the personal history. And that is consciousness. You are, in essence, timeless consciousness. This mind-made sense of self is also much more focused on the negative than the positive. To be free, you awaken to who you are beyond your history and your life situation. And now on to joy. Now, joy, what piece of music do you think comes to mind? Yes, the Ode to Joy, which has been around for 200 years or so, or something like that. Beethoven, the Ninth Symphony, the last movement, and it's called the Ode to Joy. Most of you will know what I'm talking about, and those of you who are not familiar with classical music, if I sing it, then you will know what it is. Unfortunately, I'm very bad at singing, but it goes like Freude schöner Götter, Funken, Tochter aus Elysium. And now I can't stop. Wirbet, wirbet. Wir betreten feuertrunken himmlische dein Heiligtum. Deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Mode streng geteilt. Alle Menschen werden Brüder, wo dein sanfter Flügel weilt. Ja. I'm better at it than I thought. Now I'd like to give you the translation because many people are familiar with the tune and the song, but perhaps not so many people know what it actually means. Now the words Beethoven took from the poet Schiller, who wrote this poem, Ode to Joy, which is a praise of joy. So I'll just give you the beginning of what I just sang, or if you can call it singing. The translation of this reads, joy, beautiful, divine spark. Now joy, the poet personifies the state of joy. So he speaks of joy as if joy were a person. Joy, beautiful, divine spark, daughter from Elysium. Elysium is a celestial realm in Greek mythology. So joy is the daughter, in other words, comes from the celestial realm. It is something divine. We enter your sanctuary burning with fervor, O heavenly being, still addressing joy. O heavenly being, your magic brings together what custom or convention has sternly divided. So it reunites what human custom has divided. All men shall become brothers, of course that includes sisters. All men shall be, and that includes women, it's humans. All humans shall become brothers and sisters where your gentle wings hover. The gentle wings of joy. That is the translation of the old beginning of the Ode to Joy. So it brings you back to the state of connectedness with all other humans. And therefore there is something divine in the state of joy. That is the essence of this poem that Beethoven liked so much that he put it to music. It goes on later, there are more lines which we don't need now, but towards the end it has this beautiful line, be embraced millions, this kiss to the whole world. That is towards the end when it says, seid umschlungen Millionen, diesen Kuss der ganzen Welt. And then there's the celestial voices of the choir. Beautiful piece. It's absolutely divine, especially also the message that it contains. Now, I'm not going to just play the whole piece here. There's a particular version of it that I discovered that is called the flash mob version of it. Now, I love flash mobs. I don't know if everybody is familiar with that term. It means when a group of people come together and do something very strange or unusual, unexpectedly. Now, flash mobs are not spontaneous because they need to be planned beforehand, but they disrupt the normal workings of routine everyday life or existence. So, for example, you get flash mobs when people
200 people in a public place suddenly freeze for 5 minutes in whatever position they happen to be in. And then all the people who don't know what's going on, they go, what happened? In a way, you could say it has no particular purpose, but perhaps there is a purpose, and often it awakens people out of their habitual slumber. And sometimes flash mobs is music, that suddenly a group of people begin to perform a piece of music. It looks totally spontaneous, but of course they all plan to do it. But all the people who experience that are transported into a state of astonishment. And this is the piece here which has been around the internet, and some of you may know it. Some people say, oh, I don't like this because it was financed by a bank and it's used as a commercial, in the same way that our first piece that we saw this evening is a commercial. But if that is a commercial, it doesn't say you need to use our bank in order to be in a state of joy. No, they just financed it, and here it is. So there's no link between the bank and I have no objection to it whatsoever. If they spend the money on something beautiful like that brings joy to people, well, why object to that? Now, where this happened was in Spain, in a small city near Barcelona, Sabadell, and the piece is called the Sabadell Flash Mob. The musicians are professional musicians. Now, the most beautiful thing, apart from the music, and it's a short version of it, just 5 minutes or so, the most moving thing, apart from the music itself, is the reaction of the people who don't know what's going on, and how they become transformed from their habitual state into suddenly and experiencing joy or astonishment. They are stopped in their track, their mind stopped, and they go, so all the different reactions of people are very moving, very touching. So let's watch it now, the Sabadell Flash Mob. Here we go.